everyone. Welcome to Stanford Medicine Tools for Healthcare Data Science, Tutorial 1, Part 7. I'm Priya Desai. In this video, we're actually going to dive deep into exploring the SynPuff data, which resides on our starr-training GCP project via Jupyter Notebooks. And we're going to do this one of two ways. Either you can explore this using the Jupyter Notebooks that have been installed on your local machine, or you should have installed the Docker container, and instructions for both should have been available to you in the earlier video. If not, here are the links for both of those videos. Either one works fine. They are equivalent. They will both access the same data set, and we're going to run the same query. They're just two different ways of doing it. So for those of you who are new to both Jupyter Notebooks and or Docker, just a little bit of background. Jupyter Notebooks is just really a web interface for you to be able to run Python code that is shareable. You can it allows live visualization. It allows you to comment, have code snippets as well as text snippets. So it's really good for exploratory data analysis, and is really across the board the best, something that a lot of data scientists use for data analysis. Jupyter Notebooks is the preferred way to access data from Nero. Nero is where the star OMOP dataset, the actual dataset lives. And so we wanted to make sure we introduce Jupyter Notebooks to you and get you started using Jupyter Notebooks. The Docker setup is basically Jupyter Notebooks in what's called a container. So essentially, you don't have to do the whole Jupyter Notebook setup. You don't need to make sure that you have the right version of Python. You don't need to install the Google SDK and so on. You would need to install Docker, and when you spin up a Docker container, it's like a virtual environment where the environment, so that you can access the Google project, all of that has been set up for you. So use one of these two. You don't need both. And whichever way you decide that you're going to access the GCP project and the data set. You are going to need this to follow along with the rest of the tutorial. Another site that is really important for you to get to know well is this one, code.stanford.edu. I've actually already opened it right here. Here's my tab. So actually, let me do this. Let me go ahead and close these, and let me open another tab. Okay, so this is Stanford's GitLab. All of you should have been given access to this particular project. This is the star data users Nero star notebooks project. This project, if you you need, the only way to access this this GitLab is you need to log in using your Stanford email account. So, Stanford authentication should work. So once you log in, you should all be able to see this particular project. If you go into the project, you should see a bunch of different directories. Go into notebooks. This particular directory actually contains a lot of notebooks containing sample code on how to query different clinical tables. And then in this directory called tutorials, you can actually find all the notebooks that we will be using for all these tutorials. So there are two notebooks for tutorial 1. One is for those who are really new to SQL. There's an intro to SQL notebook, and the other tutorial, the main notebook that we'll be using for this tutorial is this one, tutorial 1, accessing OMOP in BigQuery Python notebook. There is code in here already available for you, regardless of whether you're using a Jupyter Notebook or you're using a Docker container. I'm going to walk you through each scenario on how you would get this code up and running on your local machine. So the first thing I want you to do is you want to make sure that you get this file. This is the newest file in the repository on your local machine. For those who are familiar with Git, feel free to go ahead and you can clone this directory. For those who are not familiar with Git, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and click Tutorial 1. Go ahead and this is the download button. Go ahead and download it. So this notebook, this is the most recent notebook in the repository. It has now been downloaded to my local machine. If I want to find this notebook, I'm gonna go look in my Finder window, go look in Downloads, and there is that notebook. That's the notebook that I just downloaded. Okay, so let's put that aside. To start accessing it via the notebook, I'm going to go through each scenario. So first, let's go through the scenario where the Jupyter Notebooks have actually already been installed on your local machine. So go ahead and open a terminal. Okay, I'm in a terminal. I'm just going to see where I am, see what's here. I have already created a directory called Starr Notebooks. You can create a directory. I recommend that you create a directory where you would keep all the material from today's tutorial. So call it whatever you like. If you've cloned the entire directory, then absolutely go ahead and go into Starr Notebooks, the clone directory, and make your way to where this file is. But I'm just going to go into, I don't remember what is in this particular directory, so let me just go there. Okay, so looks like I did clone this directory because you can see I have the entire structure that is in here. So I have the README, the Markdown, the notebooks. So I cloned my directory here. What I want to do is, once I'm in the directory where I want to run my Jupyter Notebooks from and where I'm going to store the files that I'm going to use for this tutorial and for maybe the next few tutorials. Once you're in that directory, go ahead and, since you've already installed Jupyter Notebooks, go ahead and run a notebook. So I've opened a notebook in this particular directory. The notebook, I can see the structure of the directory in the GUI, which is in my web GUI. What I want to do next is I want to get this notebook that I downloaded into this folder. So the way to do it, you can use Finder or any other method that you have. I'm actually just going to use the command line. So I'm in Starr Notebooks, and what I want to do is I want to move the notebook from the downloads into this particular directory. So this notebook should have been moved, so let me refresh, and here it is. So I can see this notebook, the other files. So I see my README file, my Markdown directory, my notebooks directory, and this Python notebook. Go ahead and open this notebook. So for those of you who have not Git cloned the entire repo, go ahead and open this notebook and you can work straight off of this notebook. For those who have Git cloned the repository, the GitLab repository, your notebook should be identical to this notebook. Then your notebook, if you go in and look in here in your notebooks, tutorials, this notebook should be identical to whatever's in the repository if you just downloaded it. So yeah, whichever way. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to work in this notebook, okay, to just show you along what needs to be done. So okay, if you have Jupyter Notebooks installed, you should be able to go ahead and run the cells in this notebook. I'm going to walk you through some of the changes that you might need to make. The first cell, for those who are totally new to Jupyter Notebooks, as you can see, it really allows for very well formatted text as well as code. And so you can really, it's almost like writing live code. You know, you can document what you've done. You can have figures, all of that. So it makes for really good reproducible science, and Jupyter Notebooks are the way to access data from the Nero platform. That is the recommended way. So we really wanted to make sure that all of you are familiar with Jupyter Notebooks. So go ahead and run this first cell. This first cell is just importing modules that you would need to run the rest of the notebook. So go ahead, it should just run fine. For those of you who, you know, if it asked you which kernel you want, I'm using Python 3, but you can go in here, click on kernel. You can restart and clear output. You can go ahead and change kernel, so make sure you pick Python 3. You should have done that, gotten Python 3 as part of your installation. The latest version of Python, 3 point whatever it is, that's fine. Go ahead and run this cell. You can run this cell either by clicking on this run button, or if you're on a Mac, it's control return. When you get this asterisk sign here, that means that the cell is actually actively running. If there's nothing, if there's no symbol here, that means this cell has not yet been run. Okay, so now if you're using the Jupyter Notebook installed on your local computer, which is what this part of the video is about, you make sure you comment out the cell below for the Docker container. So this cell should run fine. For you guys, you would need to make sure that this path indeed points to the correct JSON file. Remember, we had downloaded the JSON file and installed your application default credentials. This path should point to your JSON file. So for me, it points to user/PRD, because PRD is my SUNET ID. For you, it should, if you're using a Mac, it's probably user/ whatever your SUNET ID is, .config-cloud /cloud /application default credentials JSON, assuming you followed the instructions in the installation video. You should actually have that. The Google Cloud project should be set correctly. If you're using the Jupyter Notebook, this is going to just give you an error, so you don't want to run this cell. So either don't run this cell, or you can comment it out, whatever works. So a quick shortcut for commenting is just command \, or go ahead and you can put this $ sign, and that'll comment out the code. So now I'm going to go ahead and run this. Now even if I run this cell, you will see that nothing will happen because it's all commented out. Okay, so when I run this cell above, you do get this warning in pink. Don't worry about it. It's just a credentials warning. It's just the way we've set up our Google SDK and are using it. It's nothing to worry about. You can go ahead and ignore that warning. So let's go ahead and make sure that you make sure that you can indeed access the SynPuff data. So again, remember the SynPuff data, I actually have my BigQuery pulled up here. So go ahead and open your BigQuery, open your GCP console, go to starr-training. In starr-training, go ahead and go to the SynPuff dataset, and that's where your files are. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to explore these files, and you should be able to explore them here as well as here and actually see the same thing. So, I want to convince you that both are equivalent, but once you're on Nero, the desired way that you should access the data is only via Jupyter Notebooks. All right, so Docker container was commented out. Let's just check our GCP authentication and BigQuery connectivity. So, okay, so I'm asking it what is the project, because I had actually assigned it above, so it gives me the right answer here. This should run fine. I should see so I'm RIT starr-training, and then these are the These are the data sets that I should see in SOMR IT starr-training. We can go in and check, see if that's what we see on this console. So in SOMR IT starr-training, that's what I see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So these are the data sets I see, and that's on the console, and you can see that there's exactly the same data sets that I see even when I access it via the notebook. Let's check the BigQuery connectivity using a public data set. Go ahead and run this. This should give you an output. For those of you it doesn't, don't worry about it. I know that some settings have changed. What you can do is go ahead and actually go to the next cell. So where it says person table, go ahead and just see if you can run that cell. And if you can run that cell and it doesn't give you any errors, you should be all fine. So this is how you would set up your Jupyter Notebooks for when, if your Jupyter Notebooks were installed locally. I am now going to close this Jupyter Notebook and going to show you what you would need to do if you opened it on the container, how you would go about doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the place. So this is where I had started my Jupyter Notebook. I'm going to just go and press Control-XC and shut down this notebook. Okay, so it's shut down, and I'm going to shut it down. Okay. Now I'm actually going to try and do the same thing but using a Docker container. So if you had followed along with the Docker container tutorials, you should have had a little directory where you had downloaded the run docker.py and then the JSON file from the Stanford Medicine box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go make my way to the directory where I actually saved that. So for me, that is in this directory called Dockerized Tutorials. So if I go into this directory and I list what's in here, I also only have the run docker.py and the SOMR IT training, that JSON authentication file. That's all I have in here. So I'm going to go ahead and just go ahead and run the docker.py file. So go Python you can see that the Docker container is spinning up. It gives me a URL. That's the URL I should use. So go ahead and open that URL. And here I have opened, so this Jupyter Lab, this Jupyter Notebook, this Jupyter Lab is actually running on a Docker container. As you can see, the Google SDK has already been installed for you. There is the starr Notebooks. This basically is a copy of what you had in code.stanford.edu. It should be a copy of this, but based on when you're watching this tutorial, it could be a little bit outdated. And so what I would recommend is the following. What you want to do is, as stated in the Docker tutorial, in the Docker video, go ahead and first move starr Notebook into your work container, into your work directory. Okay, so now starr Notebooks is in the work directory. If you go in here, you can see this was from 2 months ago, as of this video. So this is actually old. So if you actually go in here and look at these notebooks in this tutorial, this is from a while ago, and this particular notebook you will find is not identical to the notebook as is in the repo today. So what I would recommend that you do here is go back to your work directory, because that's where this JSON file, which we really need, is contained. And then go ahead and do the same thing again, which is go back to your starr notebooks folder here in the GitLab, go to notebooks, go to tutorials, go to tutorial 1, go ahead and download it. So you download it. So I'm going to go ahead and download it again. Okay, and then you come here and now you're in your work directory. You have the JSON file right here. What you can do is you can use this button and upload the notebook. So now I've uploaded that notebook. So this is the same notebook. Now I've uploaded it here. I'm going to go ahead and open it. And now this notebook is exactly the same notebook that I had downloaded, which is the same notebook as is in the repository. And now you can actually go ahead and do exactly what we had done with the other scenario where you have a Jupyter Notebook when you run it straight off of your laptop. This particular cell should just run without any problem. Now you are in this category where you're not using the Jupyter Notebook installed on your local computer. So you want to actually comment this first cell out. So let's go ahead and comment it out. And now, because you're using the Docker container, you want to use this cell. And now the JSON key file name, that's this file name. So it's all been set up appropriately. That's the name of the container. So you should be all set. Go ahead and run it, and it should run and not give you any errors. You want to go ahead and check for your BigQuery connectivity. Go ahead, it's the same datasets. It's the same cells, so they should run just like that. So there should be no difference in your notebook rendition, whether you run it on your local laptop or you run it in the Docker container. So I'm assuming that for both kinds of users, we are at the same position, and I'm going to just continue with the rest of the tutorial. So this was the part where you just check your connectivity using a public data set. And then I had asked you to go ahead and check with the person table. And that person table should run. All right, so now let's go back to the tutorial slide deck. Well, I've already given out this answer, but never mind. Where do you think you would find out how old a patient is? Where would you find the age of a patient? So take a couple of moments, think about it. Think about which table it would be in, and then feel free to pause the video, think about it, and then proceed. So those of you who guessed person, that is correct. It is in the person table. So let's go ahead and actually explore the person table a little bit. So I'm going to go back to the notebook, and here are just some queries that are actually exploring the person table. So the first query is really just saying, let's select star from the person table, give me the first 10, limit 10, so give me the first 10 records from the person table. Go ahead and run the next couple of cells. This cell basically just tells you, hey, what are the columns in the person table? So if I actually go in here and I go into my SynPuff data set and I go into the person table, this list of columns, this is exactly what I'm going to see here. That's exactly the same as this list. Okay, so now let's go ahead and check a few of the rows. So these are, 5, randomly sampled rows. You may not get exactly the same rows as I get. It's a database, so, and it's not going to pull up, it's not really indexed, so it's just going to pull up 5 random rows. And so if I go in here and I say preview, that's exactly what it's doing here. It's pulling up, the top 8 results is what I'm seeing in here. So go ahead and explore this table. We understand, many of our users feel like, hey, this is a really long name or string to type out. Can we make this simpler? And yes, it's easy to parameterize it. Remember, this is the data, this is the GCP project name, this is the data set name, and then this is the table name. The person is the table name. So if you go ahead and parameterize it, we've said the project ID is RIT starr-training, dataset ID is SynPuff, the table is person, and now you can actually go ahead and always use just this parameterized query. You would need to tell it, you need to tell it what is project ID and what is dataset ID. But go ahead and run this, and this query should actually be this query will be identical to the query that you just ran above. All right, so if we want to find out a few other things like, hey, how many persons are in this person table? Remember we had asked you this question in one of the earlier videos. So you can confirm and make sure that the query in the Jupyter Notebook gives you exactly the same thing. So go ahead and run this query. And it's, let's see, it's 2.3 million, right? Yeah, it's about 2.3 million. So, and that's what this had given you as well. So if I go into details, yeah, it's 2.3 million rows. So those are completely equivalent. Go ahead, there's just some more queries, feel free to try them out. Number of patients grouped by gender. And we can actually plot this. So 0 is male, 1 is female, and then that's the ratio, that's the bar plot. Can we do counts by year of birth across all the person records that are in the SynPuff data? Sure, go ahead. This is the query for that. And that's your year of birth and number of persons who were born that year in this data set. What's the frequency distribution of patients by state in this data set? That's the next query. And you can go ahead and look at that person count by state. The next, well, actually, no, let me go back to the person table. So the things to remember in the person table is that each person has one unique record. The person ID is numeric. So if you go up and you look at the person table, this person ID, that's what is used to identify a patient. So you no longer have MRNs or social security numbers or anything like that. This is a de-identified number. It's a numeric value. It's the person ID, and that's what you would use to identify the person. The person ID exists in all the clinical data, in all the clinical tables. So this person ID column is there in the person table, it's in the condition table, it's in the observation table, it's in the procedure occurrence table. That's how you would pull out records for person ID 803. So person ID is numeric. There is no history of location and demographics, not in version 5.3.1. You have just the last location, and in the de-identified data, you will just have the zip code of the last location. Year of birth is required, but the day and month is optional. So this does imply the data with bad birth dates. So if we have birth dates that are, I don't know, pre-1850 or in the future, those records are just dropped. Foreign key to the location provider and care site table that contains one record is the person ID table. All right. Next, if you want to know something like, was a patient hospitalized, what table do you think you would look at? So yes, go ahead, pause the video, take a couple of minutes to think about it, and then you can restart the video. So for those of you who said the visit occurrence table, that is correct. You would find that information in the visit occurrence table, and that's the next table we're going to explore. So because visit occurrence IDs, and if I was just to say, hey, select star for visit occurrence, select star from the visit occurrence table, you and I are not going to get the same thing. So what we are doing is actually saying, can you tell me all the visit occurrences for patient ID equal to 1? Because remember, this is a distinct patient, and it's the same patient for you and for me. So go ahead and run this. This particular columns values to list just gives you a listing of the columns. This is the same columns that you would find in, if you go to the visit occurrence table and you look at the schema, this list of columns is exactly what, is exactly what this list of columns is. And here is just 15 random rows from the visit occurrence table that have been pulled out. As you can see, even the visit occurrence table will have the person ID column, and the person ID is person ID equal to 1, which is what we had asked for. So we had said where person ID is equal to 1. If you explore the columns or the fields in the visit occurrence table, there's a visit concept ID. So if you want to understand what does visit concept ID mean, the way you would find that out is actually you would link the visit concept ID to the concept table. The concept table is basically the dictionary of all things OMOP. So go ahead and link it, and what we get is the visit concept ID could take values such as, whoops, no wait, what am I doing here? Okay, this is actually unnecessary here. Yeah, these are the kind of visit concept IDs that you would see in the visit occurrence table, right? So the concept names, the visit occurrence IDs are types are outpatient, inpatient, and then we have a whole lot of no matching concept. That's all we're going to that's all we're going to cover in this video. In the next video, we will go ahead and explore the rest of the tables. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.
The preceding program is copyrighted by the Board of Trustees of the Leland Stanford Junior University. Please visit us at med.stanford.edu.